It's a Star Wars show with John Justice. Thank you so much for checking out another episode. As always, if you want to email, you can do that. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Or if you happen to be watching the episode on YouTube, leave a comment down below, and we'll get to those on next week's episode. So first off, a bit of a programming note for the episode this week. Typically, since the start of this particular show, I have put the podcast and the show under the My Nerd World banner. Well, I am officially saying goodbye to the My Nerd World label to the show. When I had started doing the show, I initially wanted to make it completely separate, and it still is, from my weekly radio show. Currently Monday through Friday, 6 until 9 a.m. on KTLK here in Minneapolis. Worldwide on the iHeart Radio app, you can go in and listen to the show. But as time progressed, I realized that really most people know me through John Justice, and I decided to label the YouTube page and the podcast as well that I do. That used to be under My Nerd World. Now it's just under John Justice. So therein lies the reason for the change. However, the content will remain the same, apart from the addition now permanently of video. So if you're listening to the podcast, you can go and watch a video version of this on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. Just search for John, Jon Justice, and you'll find it there. I plan on expanding the visual aspect and of the podcast, the visual component of the podcast, when time permits. Some days, like today, it'll be more just me behind the microphone sharing the latest news about Star Wars, of which there is some very interesting news to get into. We have some emails to share this week from TalkShowNerd@gmail.com and comments left on YouTube as well. An interesting article titled, "Was The Rise of Skywalker Really That Bad?" I certainly don't think so. I've made it no secret how much I absolutely love that film, but it's an interesting read nonetheless. But more importantly, there was an article that dropped earlier this week from The Hollywood Reporter relating to the future of the Star Wars franchise and why I personally think that if they are heading in this direction, this is exactly the right move for Lucasfilm and Disney when it comes to Star Wars on the big screen.
This is not going to go the way you think.
So first off, let's just get into the article from The Hollywood Reporter. Forget the Death Star, the most coveted weapon in the Star Wars movie arsenal. That character is Rey Skywalker. Since the November 7th reveal that Simon Kinberg had signed on to develop and write and produce a new Star Wars trilogy for Lucasfilm and Disney, debate has focused on whether or not it would be a continuation of the 9-film Skywalker saga, tying it to the legacy of Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and the storylines first laid out by George Lucas in 1977. The reason for the debate is that the new hoped-for trilogy would feature Rey in some fashion. Some fans have expressed criticism that Lucasfilm would return to the well to make episodes, as they are called, beyond the 9 movies that comprise the Skywalker story, which has been billed as concluding in 2019's Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. That film grossed $1.077 billion globally, but also wasn't received well by much of the fan base. It received a B+ grade from audiences polled by CinemaScore and a 51% critics tally on Rotten Tomatoes. But Rey, the scavenger turned Jedi, played by Daisy Ridley, in the last 3 episodic movies, is the key to the franchise's next turn. That potentially puts Kinberg's trilogy story development, as early as it's in its conceptual stages as it may be, on a collision course with Rey's standalone movie that is actively in the works from director Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. Now, that feature, revealed with fanfare in 2023 at Star Wars Celebration in London, is to star Ridley and could have already been in production were it not for some unanticipated headwinds. Perhaps this is why Lucasfilm was receptive to Kinberg's multi-story pitch, anything to move Rey forward, but it But does it engender rumors in the Star Wars underground of filmmakers jostling for characters? Ridley, for her part, recently told The Hollywood Reporter, "I feel like the new ones will be so interesting. Time has passed, a lot has changed for me personally, and it will be interesting to come back to someone who I know so well, but is in a different moment." Now, while insiders dispute the notion that there is a battle for Rey, there definitely is internal deliberation within Lucasfilm as to what to do with the heir to the next Skywalker. She is the most valuable cinematic asset in some ways, maybe the only one Star Wars has right now. One source close to the franchise tells The Hollywood Reporter, Pedro Pascal's Mandalorian and Grogu are Disney Plus creations and will have their big screen power tested with a feature directed by Jon Favreau. According to sources, Rey is set to play a role in several movies that are being developed, although which ones remains unclear. Then it gets into the Star Wars movie development being under scrutiny for years since Disney bought Star Wars and Lucasfilm. They go on to talk about Rey, created in the post-Lucas era, is arguably the only entity with currency on the big screen now. The closest is a little bear, says another source. Now, what the Kinberg hiring lays bare is that the development of the movies at the company remains its own unique ecosystem in Hollywood. There are numerous Star Wars movies being developed that overlapped characters and timelines. They're not related, but whatever one were it to come out first could, in a domino effect, then impact the ones after it. James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi movie that takes place long before the Skywalkers may be one of the exceptions. Some Lucasfilm directors are aware of what others are working on while others are not. For instance, Taika Waititi is working on a Star Wars movie. Sean Levy has a feature project in the works. Donald Glover's Lando idea has moved over development from TV to film. Rogue Squadron, that project, is still in development to be a feature. It's a different way of development, says another insider familiar with the company's way of working. There is so much parallel work going on. It also points to a unique nature within Star Wars. To fans, and in this case, filmmakers and producers, it's not just a brand or a franchise, but akin to a religion. Unlike Marvel or DC, with decades of stories propelling them forward, or even Harry Potter with 7 fleshed-out books, Star Wars at its core has been the original George Lucas movies, and nothing has been codified or made more canonical in modern times than those 3 films. You're being asked to create a New Testament, adds one source who worked on previous movies, and no one can agree on anything, and there's a lot of second-guessing about meanings. Another source familiar with the process is more business-minded, noting that Star Wars is nostalgia-based enterprises, or a nostalgia-based enterprise, and they're running out of ways to create nostalgia. The television side doesn't appear to have these problems. As several insiders note, that arm has a lot more freedom to expand Lucas's universe, which is why there's been a varied slate that runs, for better or worse, in the eyes of fans, the gamut from Andor to The Acolyte, as well as a corner for Ahsoka, creator Dave Filoni, and the chief creative officer at Lucasfilm. Adds another insider, to make standalone movies or continuing the Skywalker saga in any form is a fundamental question the company faces as it tries to move forward. Now, before I add my commentary to this, of which I have much, some leakers are saying that we have the Charmin film about Rey starting her new Jedi Order. We have a new Kingsburg trilogy of films in which Rey would potentially play an Obi-Wan Kenobi role. And then we have the Sean Levy film, which is said to feature an older Rey, which was, and I don't know if it was supposed to be quite as old as the one that was being pitched by Damon Lindelof. That was a much older Rey. So, what does this all mean? I'm excited. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this. So first off, I want to make this particular point to help establish my view on this beyond my own subjective fandom of the Rey Skywalker character and the sequel trilogies themselves. I remember hearing an interview with McQuarrie, and his name is escaping me. Chris McQuarrie? The director of the Mission Impossible, the most recent Mission Impossible films. And he was talking about the Hollywood system, and specifically the amount of data that Hollywood has at its fingertips in terms of information they can call to go and make their creative decisions. Lucasfilm and Disney, have data relating to the fandom and how they feel about particular characters. And with all the controversies, as somebody who follows this on a daily basis, with all the controversies surrounding the sequel trilogy, of which I understand, and I respect those opinions, I enjoy all three of those films for different reasons, but I can even admit that in terms of the cohesiveness between the three, it's disjointed, especially with Rian Johnson's film, which I think is a masterpiece personally, and I also love The Rise of Skywalker, but the flow of those three films together just doesn't work very well, especially from a visual standpoint. Storytelling-wise, I have much less of an issue. Rey was never the complaint. Now, I'm brushing aside the Mary Sue complaints, which are out there, certainly from The Force Awakens, speaking of which. Those have kind of diminished a bit in the wake of the entire story being told and finding out that she's a Palpatine in Episode 9. I think that kind of was enough to stem those individuals that thought that Rey was a Mary Sue. I never felt that. Now, some of the reason why I didn't felt that is I read some of the ancillary material about Rey's time on Jakku and the training that she did for herself, and so it made sense to me as to why she was able to do the things that she did. J.J. Abrams likes to take shortcuts in his movies. You see little glimpses here and there of Rey defending herself or talking about the Falcon and things of that nature, and he seems to use that to be enough of a reason why Rey was able to, do and have the abilities that she was able to have in those particular films. And then by the end of the film, in her fight against Kylo Ren, she taps into the Force. So I never bought into the Mary Sue arguments. Now, that being said, Rey is still one of the, if not the most popular character from those three movies. And when we're talking about younger generations who discovered Star Wars through the sequel trilogy, those individuals are getting older and are going to be the next young people to go and embrace Star Wars as the rest of us sort of go and age out. They have the data, and I'm sure that data shows that when it comes to any complaints relating to the sequel trilogy, Rey was not very high on that list. When it comes to what's popular about those trilogies, Rey was very high on that list. She's a great character. Her portrayal, Daisy Ridley's in The Rise of Skywalker, is my favorite of the sequel trilogy. And honestly, she's one of my favorites of the entire Star Wars universe. I gravitate towards the female characters. I like strong female characters. That's just me. I'm just how I am. I liked Luke Skywalker and Han Solo growing up. Princess Leia was cool. But with the recent storytelling, I love Sabine, I love Hera, and I certainly think Rey is awesome. I just find those characters to be more interesting. Even though their prominence is certainly relating to that, with lesser male characters dominating Star Wars as leads within the Disney and Lucasfilm era. I've always said that, one, Star Wars belongs on the big screen, and two, they are best suited for success to move forward and continue with the episodic nature of the films. What they're doing in playing in the other timelines that exist, whether it's Andor, whether it's what's taking place in the Mandoverse prior to the sequel trilogy, it's a little less there, but my point is that when it comes to Andor, we know it's going to end going into Rogue One. I'm looking forward to Season 2 next year, make no mistake, but we also know the fate of those characters. We know what happens in the sequel trilogy. We may not know where the characters in the Mandoverse end up, right? Being the Mandalorian or Ahsoka or Sabine. We don't know where they are in the sequel trilogy, and perhaps their stories can be told beyond Episode 9, since they're not that far away from that particular timeline of when the Ahsoka series was taking place. My point is that forward momentum within Star Wars storytelling is what is going to sustain Star Wars, because the fandom needs to be able to go and speculate. And there's not a lot of speculation that can be done on podcasts like this and other more popular shows if you continue to play in the existing timelines where you know what's going to happen based off of the material that's already come before it. And why not go ahead and take advantage of the fact that most everybody is accustomed to the storytelling starting with episode 1 and moving through episode 9. You kind of be like the Hunger Games, and they did this a bit, and I actually like Songbirds and Snakes quite a bit, it being a prequel to the other films, but I don't ever see them doing like an offshoot of the Hunger Games. Maybe they will, and I'll be proven wrong. I would think that you would do an extension going off of the last Hunger Games. Now, it's not really possible in the Hunger Games series. That wrapped up quite nicely, but you never know, which is why they went back into the prequels, and I'm sure we'll have other prequels as well. They're kind of taking a Star Wars route relating to the storytelling. All this is to say that if Rey is the future of the franchise at the moment, I agree with the insiders in the article that she is the most popular character. May not be among the older fans, but certainly among those younger fans. And they would be wise to go and tap into that. That's a great character. Ultimately, they just need great stories and great filmmakers. I'm still convinced that Charmin Obaid-Chinoy is not going to be the director of the Daisy Ridley film. And if anything, I think that Lucasfilm is about to go head down the road that I believe they should head down. And that is, give us an episode 10. Give us an episode 11. Give us an episode 12. Just make sure it's a good story arc, that the writing is good, and get away from all the things that have messed up some of the storytelling as of late. To me, that is the best option that you can go with, and the best means of bringing back the popularity and sort of saving the franchise. It's unbelievable to me that we're heading on 5, 6, 7 some odd years out from the last theatrical release of Star Wars. That's just, if you had told me that when I went to go see The Rise of Skywalker, that was the last movie I was going to see, and I would be heading into 2025 with no new Star Wars movies, I would have told you were crazy. I would have said that's ludicrous. And yet, here we are. So I think it's a great move. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I think that Rey is the future of the franchise at the moment. I don't want to see them go back and CGI the bunch of the old characters. No, forward momentum. Build off of what you've done before, even if it does have its controversies, and just make sure that it's really good storytelling. It's not that hard.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
All right, let me share this with you. Culture Slate. The sequel trilogy has yet to receive the best reception from fans. While the author from Culture Slate says, I love the sequels, they have flaws, one of the biggest ones being the direction of the films. The last one in the trilogy, The Rise of Skywalker, is the worst in most people's opinion, but is the final film really that bad? The answer is no, and I know this will shock many people, but I will explain why. The movie has its issues, but I don't hate it like some people do. I enjoyed it, and I think it's a perfect ending to the saga. One of the biggest issues in the movie is the dialogue. Now, again, this is according to the writer, and I just disagree with a lot of this. I think the dialogue is fine. But anyway, I want to share with you their thoughts. This Star Wars movie and the dialogue has never been a strong point. Even in the original trilogy, for some reason, some of the lines they say in this movie are even worse, with the biggest one being somehow Palpatine returned. Fair enough. It also relies heavily on nostalgia and classic quotes. The direction of the trilogy is also a big issue. This isn't the movie's fault, but going from J.J. Abrams to Rian Johnson back to J.J. doesn't make for a cohesive trilogy, and I mentioned that earlier. The good, in my opinion, however, outweighs the bad. First of all, Rey is at her peak in this movie. She's used to the training Luke and Leia gave her and can utilize it in her fights. She is stronger than she ever was. It was also great to see Leia train Rey at the beginning of the movie. Rey also was never tempted to the dark side. Yes, Kylo Ren tried to get her to switch, but it was never going to happen. She is too strong in the light. Rey has grown considerably throughout the trilogy, and it's great to see how far she can come in the end. She deserves the Skywalker name, and I'm glad that she took it. The Force Ghost scene gives me goosebumps to this day. While it would have been cool to see the actual Force Ghost, the voices alone are enough for me to love it. And all the Jedi that came before her help her in the moment she needs it most. She can use all of her powers and defeat Palpatine once and for all. helping is a big part of Star Wars, and we see this at the end when all the civilians in the galaxy bring their ships to help take down the Final Order once and for all. They're not soldiers, they're just people. It's a beautiful scene, and it really keeps up the hope message in Star Wars. It also contributes to the much-deserved happy ending that the Resistance fighters finally get. I also have to give an honorable mention to Babu Frick. I always love it when they introduce a little guy in Star Wars, so naturally, I love Babu Frick. He is so chaotic and helpful, but he also is great at his job. So, is the Rise of Skywalker bad? It depends on who you ask. For me, it's a no. I saw it twice in theaters, and I loved it. I saw it 12 times in theaters, and I still enjoy it to this day. Every Star Wars movie has its flaws, and this is no different. Is that there is so much more that I could say about this movie, especially when it comes to Rey's friends and the music in the movie. Yeah, the soundtrack of The Rise of Skywalker is easily the best of the three. And that's not an easy thing to say considering how much I love the Force Awakens soundtrack. But the soundtrack that John Williams created for The Rise of Skywalker does not get enough credit. At the end of the day, the article writer says, the good outweighs the bad for me, and I will always enjoy this movie. Hopefully one day it gets the love that it deserves. Yeah, hey, listen, it's popcorn. It really is. You know, the Rian Johnson Star Wars film is a Rian Johnson Star Wars film. The Rise of Skywalker is, in and of itself, sort of a J.J. Abrams Star Wars film, but it is absolutely rewatchable in my opinion. And reading this article, after having sat on it now for a couple of weeks, and having read it before, just makes me want to go and watch the movie all over again.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, listener feedback this week, as always, you can email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. ZBH9268 says, I have to respectfully disagree with you about Dark Phoenix, comments made last week. It isn't my favorite X-Men movie, but I like it better than X3 or X-Men Origins. Tangent aside, I am excited about Kinberg and his new trilogy. I just want it all to actually be made and be good at this point. Ray, 2017 writes, you know what I don't care. You know what I don't care. You know what? I'm sorry. You know what? I don't care what anyone says. This sounds absolutely exciting. Sorry. Fingers crossed in the coming months that we will be in the beginnings of some pre-production stages. No matter how long it takes, it will hopefully be worth it in the end. Talking about the Kinberg movies. And then Michael Tennant Music, M. Tennant Music writes, I really want to be excited about this, but it's hard when so many things get delayed or canceled. I completely agree. But thankfully, we have the existing Star Wars to still go and enjoy. All right, that wraps up this week's episode. As always, I hope you'll support a Star Wars show with John Justice. I got to get used to saying that now. I've written a science fiction series based on my love of Star Wars, and I hope you'll take a moment and check it out on Amazon.com. There are 7 books in all that complete the series, essentially 2 trilogies linked by a singular adventure in book number 4 that does tell a complete through line, but it is 2 trilogies, again, with a sort of a spin-off tale in the middle. You can head on over to Amazon.com and check out the books, but I hope you'll do that and take a look and pick up book 1 in your preferred format. When ship mechanic Taft Guardia agrees to help starfighter pilot Kate Amaro investigate a cryptic message from her late aerospace engineer father, they embark on a perilous journey of discovery amid a looming planet-wide industrial catastrophe. In the middle of a global evacuation, 2 rival megacorporations are on the brink of interstellar war as Taft, Katha, and their ragtag crew discover what may be the only hope of saving Earth's evacuees from annihilation. Listen, you enjoy Star Wars, you'll love my series. These books were written in the vein that if I were heading to a movie theater and not seeing a Star Wars film, what would I want to watch? That's why I wrote these 7 books. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction. I wrote them for adults, but they are age-appropriate for 11 years old and up. Pick up EMBARK Book 1 today. Available in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. Head on over to Amazon.com and search for EMBARK, EMBARK, and John, Jon, Justice. If you like your science fiction space opera to be epic with really cool technology, some romance, and a lot of action and unique action sequences, then EMBARK is perfect for you. Again, head on over to Amazon.com and pick up your preferred version today. Thank you so much for checking out the episode. Again, leave me a comment up on YouTube, like and subscribe to the channel. And if you're enjoying this on the podcast, I hope you will follow the podcast on whatever platform that you are listening to the show on. Until next week, I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. I'll talk to you then. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.
Not anymore, though. Got to change that.